This video is sponsored by Skillshare. I can't be the only one who gets bored of eating ice cream in the summer. Sometimes I want something nice and cooling, but when I'm not in the mood for ice cream, I choose Mahalabia instead. It's an extremely quick pudding that only uses 4 ingredients, and it's so easy to customize with loads of flavours. If you're new here, I'm Obi, and today I'll show you this classic Middle Eastern dessert, which is very versatile. We'll be making the regular plain flavoured one and a floral one, then I'll show you how to make an amazing saffron variety. Now, let's get started. So the base of this recipe follows a simple ratio that works no matter which flavour you choose to make, and it uses ingredients you probably have at home already. From experimenting, I found that 4 parts of milk, 2 parts of heavy cream, half a part of sugar and 1/3 of a part of cornstarch produce a fantastic result. You can also play around with the milk and cream ratios to affect the final texture. If you replace half a part of cream with milk, you'll end up with a softer, creamier texture, and if you replace half a part of milk with cream, you'll have a thicker texture similar to custard. In terms of flavourings, you really can flavour this with anything you want. The traditional one we get in Egypt is just milk flavour, kind of like plain cream ice cream. Sometimes it's also flavoured with vanilla, and most of the flavouring actually comes from the topping. In the Levant, this is usually flavoured with rose or orange blossom water, which are strong floral flavourings used in most of the region's desserts. You could also use whole or ground spices, and some of the ones I'd recommend are cinnamon, cardamom or saffron. Simmering the whole spices in milk for an hour would really infuse their flavour, and I'm sure cardamom mahalabia would be great. Now I'm going to make a batch of plain mahalabia, so I've weighed enough of each ingredient to fit the ratio we discussed previously. To start, I've got a heavy bottomed pot sitting on the stove with the heat turned off. First thing I add is 4 parts of whole milk, which in this case was 400 grams. Next I added 2 parts of heavy cream, which weighed 200 grams. And I followed that up with 1/3 of a part or 33 grams of cornstarch. Then I added half a part of sugar or 50 grams. Finally I added in a small pinch of salt just to enhance the flavours. This is enough for 2 generous portions, but if you want to make more or less, then just stick to the ratio. Once they're all in the pot, they need to be mixed thoroughly to combine. Dissolving cornstarch in milk is always such a pain, but it's important here that you thoroughly whisk it until no lumps remain. This took me about 3 minutes of whisking until the mixture was smooth, and you should test it by dipping a spoon in the pot, and if the mixture has no lumps when it comes out, then it's well mixed. To cook the mixture, turn the heat to medium, and you'll now stir the pot continuously until it thickens up. On my quick heating induction stove, this took me about 4 minutes, though it will differ depending upon your pot and stove. What you'll look for is the mixture starting to steam, and then all of a sudden it will thicken up. When that happens, look for these large boiling air bubbles starting to form, and once you see them, cook the mixture for about 10 seconds more. It's at this stage that you could add any powdered or liquid flavourings, so I chose to add half a teaspoon of vanilla powder. Once I mixed that in, the pudding was done, and you can see the texture that it has coming straight from the pot. Before the pudding could cool, I quickly poured it out into 2 glass serving bowls. Obviously when you're doing this, try to get the amounts to be the exact same. Then when the bowls are filled, give each one a slight shake to flatten the top of the pudding. Unfortunately, I did stop whisking when filming this batch, so I ended up with a few tiny pieces of caramelized milk, which are perfectly edible, so if that happens then don't freak out. I had a little bit of pudding left over in the pot, so I made good use of it as a chef's treat. It's surprisingly good to eat hot, but the correct way to do this is to chill your pudding until nice and cold, so into the fridge they went until completely chilled. I also made 2 more puddings, one flavoured with orange blossom and the other with saffron. For the orange blossom one I made a single portion, and when it had thickened I mixed in half a teaspoon of orange blossom water. For the saffron one I took a pinch or about 30 strands of saffron and placed them in a mortar with a 1/4 teaspoon of sugar. Then I went in with a pestle and ground the sugar into the saffron until they turned into a fine powder. Next I took 30 ml of the milk from the recipe and mixed that with the powder until it turned into this golden milk. I then washed the mortar out with even more milk, and I was left with what can only be described as liquid gold. You can use the same process to get other flavours into the dessert as long as they dissolve well into the milk. I then made another batch of the pudding, adding the saffron milk to the pot at the start with the other ingredients. This was cooked in exactly the same way until the mixture thickened, then I finished it by adding in a pinch of ground cardamom. Once I had poured it out, I added those puddings to the fridge as well, and I left them to cool for about 4 hours. While they're cooling, let's take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for real working creatives, and recently I've been using it to help figure out what kind of creative I am. A few days ago I took the class Find Your Style, 5 exercises to unlock your creative identity by Andy J. Pizza. It's an interesting course where you're given exercises that help you come up with your own style guide. The thing that resonated with me the most was Andy's idea that it's not about thinking outside the box, but creating your own box and constraints to think within. The great thing about Skillshare is that there are classes covering a wide range of topics such as creative writing, graphic design, and even food. They're broken down into short lessons and hands-on projects so you can explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in your creativity. Skillshare are always adding new premium classes to their catalogue, and best of all, there are no ads, so you can stay focused and learn the skills you want. The first 1,000 people who use the link in my description will receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare Premium. Thank you, Skillshare. Now let's get back to the recipe. Just before serving, I made a fruit and nut topping that goes great with the plain flavoured pudding. I took 35 grams of toasted hazelnuts and I chopped them up into small pieces like so. I added them to a bowl and then I added in 12 grams of sultanas or raisins. Next I went in with half a tablespoon each of sugar and desiccated coconut and 1/8 teaspoon of cinnamon. Finally I added 1 teaspoon of softened butter and I mixed it all together until it looked like this. To serve I took the plain flavoured one and added a pile of the fruit and nuts filling to the centre. For the saffron one I placed a small bed of desiccated coconut and I added on a few more strands of saffron. Finally, for the orange blossom one, I sprinkled it with crushed pistachio and topped it with a few edible flower petals. So there you have it, the simplest Middle Eastern pudding served 3 different ways. I don't think it gets much better than this and the possibilities are infinite. Now let's check out the taste test. Alright, let's start with the plain one first. So this one is a bit thicker and that's because we used a bit more cream than milk. That is just such a classical Middle Eastern flavour. You can't beat a creamy pudding with some nuts. It is just such a good flavour. Cleanse my palate, and so now it's time for the orange blossom one. So this one's a little bit looser and that's because we used a little bit more milk in this and a little bit less cream. So the nice thing about this is it has a very slight floral flavour because of the orange blossom, but then it still tastes like a milk pudding like the first one. Right, so the final one is the saffron one, and I've already tried this one quite a bit, but man, this is good. This one's even creamier. I think this one I might have cooked it a tiny bit less, but look at that jiggle. Iranians really know what they're doing with their desserts. Saffron is just wow. So there you have it, all 3 of them tasted. I think my favourite one is going to be the milk one, just because it's the classic flavour and it's very easy to customise with toppings, but the saffron one is something special. Alright, so thank you for watching, and if you make them Mahalabia, let me know how you found it. Of course, just send me some photos on Instagram because I really love to see how they turn out. Thank you to all of our patrons for making this video possible and supporting the channel. If you want to join them, the link is in the description box, and I'll be back next week with another recipe.